Protesters are storming the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq. The violent demonstrations follow American airstrikes on Iranian-backed forces in the country.
President Trump is blaming Iran for the attack on the embassy, and he's also calling on Iraqi forces to step up and stop it. Behnam Ben Taleblu is the senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and joins us now from Washington, D.C. to talk about what's driving these protests. So we mentioned that these protests followed American airstrikes on Iranian-backed forces in Iraq. But can you give us a little more context about just what happened and why those strikes were able to stoke such anger?
Anne-Marie, Paula, good morning. Great to be with you. There is a cycle of violence going on in Iraq right now. The U.S. responded recently with its first ever cross-border airstrike in Iraq and Syria against not a Sunni terror group, but an Iran-backed Shiite militia based in Iraq. It did those strikes against 5 targets of Kataib Hezbollah. This is a sanctioned designated terror group with close ties to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has many partners, friends, and proxies inside Iraq's popular mobilization units. This is the paramilitary that works closely with Iraqi security forces, has been a part of the fight against ISIS, but is also part of Iran's vast regional network, and they're part of their agents of influence. And Iran, I think, has used these popular mobilization units and its supporters to take retribution against the U.S., particularly going after the outer wall of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in response to those airstrikes, those 5 successful airstrikes.
And we know that Iraq is facing its own political crisis right now. So can you explain to our audience what is going on over there and how does that relate to what's happening today?
Well, it's a great question because those are all connected. Developments in Baghdad, developments in Basra to the south, as well as to the north in Kirkuk, are very important to the future of the stability of the Iraqi government and even the next Iraqi government. We know that for the past 2.5 months, there have been massive protests on the street. It's not the first time the Iraqis have taken to the street. Iraqis are chanting Iran out. They're sick and tired of government corruption. They're sick and tired of foreign influence. And they're sick and tired of being told what to do by a next-door neighbor. And this is why I believe that the protests against the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad currently are not indications of a nationalist protest, but rather are part and parcel of Iran's PMU, or Popular Mobilization, friends, partners, and allies. So what may look like a nationalist protest on the cover could be, in fact, an engineered demonstration to take retribution for those strikes that we mentioned earlier.
Okay, and then does the continued, I guess, disintegrating relationship between Iran and the United States play a role here?
Absolutely. You know, there's this cross-domain escalation that Iran is engaging in right now. That basically means if there's an area in the Middle East that the U.S. is concerned about and Iran has the capability to inflame it or raise tensions, it most certainly will. And most unfortunately, whether we like it or not, whether the Iraqi population likes it or not, Iran and the U.S. are having a tit-for-tat escalation in Iraq. Now, most unfortunately, the Iraqi people are going to be the primary losers of this because no one wants to have any kind of proxy conflict in their backyard. But the U.S., again, is couching all of its actions as defensive and as in response to actions undertaken by Iran or Iran-backed forces. In fact, you can say that even representatives of the Trump administration, from Secretary of State Pompeo to Special Representative Brian Hook, have framed these actions as defensive and the past year of their absorption of Iran-backed aggression as part of a policy of patience.
But this isn't, of course, the first time we've seen an attack on an American embassy or U.S. facility. These kinds of incidents, these can have enormous political consequences. We are in an election year. Of course, Benghazi was a word that rang through the 2016 election and throughout the Obama administration following that attack on a U.S. compound. So can you talk a little bit about the history of these kinds of incidents?
History is the key word there because there is a long history of Iranians trying to target, either formally or informally through proxy networks, American embassies, American diplomatic, as well as military installations across the region. The Islamic Revolution in 1979 in Tehran was really birthed through an act of international hostage-taking. Months after the revolution in February 79, in November 79, there was a 444-day hostage crisis. Now, an editor-in-chief of a key hardline newspaper in Tehran, in Iran, twice called on Iraqis to take over the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and emulate what the Iranians had done to the Americans in 1979, to have the Iraqis do it to the Americans in 2019. And that's why I think there is a clear linkage here between those protesting in front of the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, as well as Iran's regional designs here. So there is a long history of targeting U.S. embassies and military installations and diplomatic facilities in the region.
So, but I know you probably don't want to speculate, but you know, as we're watching these images, I keep thinking, like, where is this going? How will it unfold today? How will it unfold in a month? We've been watching all manner of protests, a number of different protests around the world. These are very different, though, than what we've seen in other countries, at least the causes for what we're seeing here in Iraq. I mean, what do you think we're going to see, say, in the next 24 hours? Do you think things will die down, or do you see them escalating?
I see them being more of the same. You know, a real escalation would be targeting more U.S. Citizens or military personnel and actually killing them. This could be a response to the U.S. strikes, and then it might die out. Or if the Iranians sense that those U.S. strikes were more of a one-off and less of a signal of resolve and more of a signal of weakness, then they might double down and think that they can eject the U.S. From Iraq. Remember that in 2011, there was an uptick in mortar and rocket attacks and even IRM attacks against diplomatic and military facilities to create the impression that, that Iran and Iran-backed militias had driven America out of the region.
All right, Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much.
Thank you.